At 16, after 7 years of isolation, pain, and physical and emotional abuse, Christine Sadry reached a breaking point. She was battered, bruised, and could no longer see a way forward, and in that moment of deep despair, she attempted to take her life. As she was slipping into unconsciousness, something deep within her stirred, a spark of life that refused to go out. Wow, that's amazing. She made a call to a friend just to thank her for her friendship. But that friend heard something in Christine's voice and sensed that something was very wrong. That phone call saved Christine's life. And it also became a turning point. That moment of hopelessness and despair became the beginning of Christine's strength.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
Christine Sadry was born in Poland behind the Iron Curtain and was adopted in 1964 by a Polish-American couple who lived in the United States. After graduating from West Catholic Girls High School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, she worked at the United States Social Security Administration from 1973 to 1979. Then she started her 31-year career with the United Nations and in 1979 working on international conferences. Later, she began working with the United Nations peacekeeping missions in Angola, Mozambique, former Yugoslavia, Sierra Leone, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you for having me.
There are so many things as I'm reading this over that I know you're going to cover, and I'm so anxious to hear that part of your story, all parts of your story, right from the beginning. I mean, this is amazing. I just really am going to enjoy this, and I know my audience will as well. So take it away, Christine, and tell us your story.
Well, thank you, Carol. To start with, I was born in Poland in a small village called Krasne behind the Iron Curtain. And when I was 5, my mother passed away. I had 3 sisters. Actually, before she was ill for a while, and she had huddled us together and told us she had to go to the hospital and told us that she would be back. And she never came back. So, it's and like maybe, I don't know, as a child, I remember a few weeks later, my father left. And so we were with our grandmother, and she was getting older, trying to run a farm. So our aunts and uncles came and they took my sisters. And in the end, I was alone with my grandmother in this little village helping her. We had a farm and cows, sheep, and vegetables and fruits. And life was pretty normal. But my grandmother always used to talk about America. So, as a child, 7, 8 years old, I knew I was behind the Iron Curtain, and I used to wonder why. And she would tell about America, what this country of great opportunity, country of plenty, that as a child, your imagination grows. So I used to, imagine where I was and what is this America. And one day, I was about 8 years old. I was running around in my village, and a man that now I know my aunt knew, but he was visiting some family there. And I ran into him, and he asked me if I wanted to come to America. So, of course, I'm 8 years old. My sisters are gone. My mother is gone. My father left. And I just thought that I could help make a better life for my family. So he asked me, "Do you want to come to America?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And I remember running back to my grandmother, and I knew that some papers had to be signed. So I told my grandmother, I said, "Let my father sign these papers. I can do it. I want to go." I felt like I would have parents. I would have, I would be in America. At 8 years old, the adoption process started. I told my school I was leaving for America. Of course, they all laughed. But I remembered one thing. I remembered that even at 8, I needed to remember my address. I knew enough that you never know what can happen in life. So for the next couple months, because Polish address for 8 years old, was a little bit difficult. So I remember practicing so that I would remember. And finally the date came, and I was put on a plane. My sisters, we all said goodbye. Of course, there was tears of sadness and yet of anticipation, because I was, in one way, I was so happy to have a new family, to have a mother and father, but I was so sad to leave my sisters behind. But in my heart, I somehow I imagined that we would be in contact. So then, of course, I arrive in America at JFK Airport, and everyone is leaving, going through immigration. And I'm there. The stewardess, the flight attendant, sits me down, stays with me for a little while, and then she leaves. And no one was waiting there for me. So I remember thinking, "Oh my God, what are they going to send me back? What's going to happen to me?" I felt like I was waiting there for maybe an hour, maybe longer. Time, I don't remember time, but I remember being afraid. But finally, my adopted father shows up. I recognize him, and we drive to Philadelphia. And I remember thinking, I'm behind the Iron Curtain in a communist village, and it was that we had hardly any electricity. We had nothing, and I see these bright lights on the streets and the cars, and all I just can remember is all this brightness and just unbelievable. I felt so blessed. And we arrive in Philadelphia at my home. I meet my adopted mother. She doesn't speak Polish, and I don't speak English. Anyway, my adopted father introduces us, and I bring a lot of suitcases and gifts because, of course, my grandmother wanted to make sure that we give them presents. And that night I was very tired because with all the flight and arriving so late, I remember going to bed. They had a nice pink bedroom for me. And the next morning I wake up very excited and with my new family. But I noticed one thing. Everything that I came with, even the clothes on my back, every document, everything disappeared. Everything was gone. There was nothing there. And I remember thinking that it was a little strange. At least the gifts that my grandmother gave me to give to this family, something would be there, but it was all gone. And a little bit of fear went down my back, a shiver. And I remember thinking, what is going on? And then at one point, I remember passing a room, and it had a padlock on it. And I thought to myself in my heart, my whole Polish life is locked behind that door. But, I still had hope. And it was difficult to communicate. My adopted father worked. I didn't very much was able to communicate with my adopted mother. I went to school. And there they put me in the fourth grade, St. Mary's, a Polish American school. And I thought I would learn something, you know. But instead, Sister Olga had me cover everyone's books. I never learned anything. And I remember thinking to myself, is there something wrong with me? Am I
Mhm.
stupid? Why is not, this is a Catholic nun that you would
Right,
think is
right,
interested in education. I never learned a word in that class. So all those things were, you get you're a child, you're 9 years old, you're in
right.
school, you don't speak the language. And the nun doesn't even bother to teach you. So I covered for a full year kids' books, and my home life was not easy either because after being there for like 2, 3 weeks, I asked my adopted father if I could write a note to my family. And I knew enough, even as a child, that I shouldn't say too much. So basically, I just said, dear grandmother, I've arrived, I'm safe, I'm okay. And that was it. And I gave it to my father, my adopted father, and that was that. And about 2 weeks later, of course, I missed my family. So I asked him if I could write again. And he said, sure. And this time I wrote something like, that I missed them. Well, the next day, he holds up that letter and he said, what? You miss your family? You have no family in Poland. We are your
Mm,
family. You have no one there, and you cannot write to you have no rights to write. You you can't talk about it. You are ours.
wow.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, oh my God. So, I was even afraid to even say anything about my family to them. And I would wait till they went to sleep to think about them, to miss them, to cry about them. And this went on for years. And not only that, but, you're 12, 13. My mother started like, we didn't even speak the same language. She was like, she would grab my skin for no reason and start twisting it.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember thinking, why is she doing this? We don't even speak the same language. I was maybe like 11, 12 years old. I didn't know what was going on. And my father was just very, I wasn't allowed out, so I never went out. He would tell me, you can't tell anyone you're adopted or you're from Poland. So basically, I was like, leaving a communist behind the Iron Curtain to end up stuck in a house that I wasn't allowed to go out. I didn't have no friends. I had no family, and basically sit and think about life. And that's what I did. I until I started to learn the language a little more, they would let me out a little bit, but still, they were always afraid that I would try to contact my family. So I had to, as a kid, I had to show up every 15 minutes. And I think one time I was late by 10 minutes and my father, punched me in my face and knocked me to the ground. So there was just, and things, of course, got slowly worse to the point where I was not raped or anything, but he started to look at me differently. And I remember thinking to myself, if he does anything to me, one of us is going to die. Really. So he would just call me different names. He would call me horrible names to try to like make me feel so humiliated, so like nothing, that I would submit to whatever he was having on his mind. Well, it never happened, but he would continually, you know, call me awful names, tell me horrible things. You're trash, you're dirt, you're this, constantly. And you're lonely, and you have a few friends, thank God. I was able to make some friends, but I wasn't able to have a family. I worked very hard in school. I tried my best, and because I knew how important education was. So all these things were difficult, but I kept going. But there was a point where my mother, I told my adopted mother, I said to her, I'm afraid, by then I was able to speak some English. And I said, I feel like he's trying to not only mentally abuse me, but to want to physically abuse me. You owe me. You owe me. And so I mentioned that to him. And then, so of course she told him. And that's when they both turned against me. And that's when I was
Mm,
in the highest, you're 16 years old, you're alone,
right.
you're in despair, you have no one to go to, you're ashamed because you're being abused emotionally and you're physically. So it was just like, and this was year after year after year of a constant psychological
Mm.
manipulation and abuse. So that's when I finally just swallowed a bunch of pills and I was like so done. I just couldn't go on anymore.
How old were you then?
16.
Oh my goodness.
That very day, my adopted mother was out, and my father he was I think upstairs or something, and he had some pills because it was in a car accident and aspirin. I just took like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
many pills, and I remember laying down, and he saw me. He was looking from up from the stairs, but in one moment I remember like I had this deep need to call my friend and thank her for being my friend. It was like this urge just like beyond me, because I of course I wasn't thinking about that. So I called her up just and I'm like, thank you so much. And I must have started the drug started to affect me, so I started slurring, and so she's like, what's going on? And I don't exactly remember what I said, but she, within that moment, she called on to her father, and they called 911. And of course, as friends, she didn't know my address, so the police had to go to her house, and she brought them over. But by then, I was pretty much unconscious. And of course, because it was in time, I was in the hospital, and I remember at one point them beating on my chest when I came to. And so then I decided
Mm.
that that was it. That I guess I could, they were nice for about 2 weeks after that. But then, of
Oh,
course,
you're kidding.
yeah, things started again. But, I really worked hard in education. I made sure that, I starting out with no language. By the time I went to eighth grade, I was an AB student. I was 80s and 90s. So I really made an effort. And then I ended up at West Catholic Girls High School. But because it was costing money at 15, they said, well, we're not going to send you there anymore because we don't want to pay. So we're going to send you to public school. And I thought I was getting a good education. So I had to find a job. So at 15, I knew I couldn't work legally because, you have to be 16 to
Right,
work.
right.
So I got it like a Philadelphia Inquirer, and I found something. I figure I'm like almost 5'9". I found like a little modeling agency, and I started working there. I did a little bit of runway, and also the owner was very entrepreneurial. We would go like to various college campuses and hand out American Express applications, and for each one that got filled out, we got $5. So that's how I put myself through high school. And then at 16, I went to work at a dress shop. And then in my junior year in high school, I knew like if they weren't going to pay for my high school, they're not going to pay for my college. And I knew that I had to get out, move out of that place because it was hell. So instead of taking college courses, I took secretarial courses, typing, shorthand,
Hmm.
all these things. So when I graduated from high school as an honor student. And back then, I guess they were Social Security Administration was looking for people looking for secretarial work, secretaries, and I got hired. I went for an interview at Social Security Administration. At that time, they were on Vine Street as secretary to a director of the Reconsideration Determination Unit there. And and that's how I ended up working. Uh, Also, I met a nice boy. I fell in love, and I would have married him, but he didn't want to get married back then. So that was, and then I learned later that he was going out on me. He was cheating or something. So I broke up with him. So here I am with these people, living, working at Social Security, and pregnant. And I
Oh
felt,
my goodness.
and I felt I could manage it, but they didn't care that I was pregnant. They were okay with that, but they were very religious people. They went to church every Sunday, every holiday, Stations of the Cross, but at home they were evil.
Oh,
So to me, religion didn't make sense. This whole showing in church, and then you come home and there's nothing Christian about you. So I'm like, I didn't want to go to church because it didn't mean anything
of course.
to them. So I remember that one Sunday, I'm like, what? I didn't go. And he actually left the church, went looking for me, found me. I think I was going to visit a girlfriend, and hit me in my face and punched me to the ground. And that moment, that day, I remember thinking, I have to leave these people because they are going to kill me. Or, I literally was afraid for my life because also if you're pregnant, you're in a more vulnerable condition. So that day I went back to their house and I got a little suitcase, or I think they gave me this little broken down suitcase, blue suitcase. I sat on the porch and I was going to leave. I had nowhere to go. And I sat there for hours wondering, what am I going to do? So finally, I called a friend, Dee, and asked her if I could stay with her for a couple of days. So I stayed with her for a couple of days. Then I went to stay with another girlfriend, Kathy, and I sort of moved around, pregnant, working, trying to save money for the baby. So, and in the end, I even got an apartment, but then I thought it was too much. So I then moved in with another girlfriend. But also my ankles were very weak. So anyway, I ended up in labor at 7 months. And I was living at a girlfriend's house. So they took me to the hospital. And I had my daughter also being the being the head of
Right.
the household. I was able to get my not pension, but like my
Hmm.
pay. So for a year, I got leave from the U.S. government. So I stayed home with my daughter. I found an apartment. Of course, my daughter's father came back. He wanted to get married then, and I'm like, no. Why am I going to marry you now? I have an apartment, I have a job, I have a baby. It didn't make any sense. So, and I figured if I did marry him, I would divorce him anyway. So that didn't happen. And then, of course, I received a phone call from Chicago from this private investigator saying, "Are you Christine so and so?" And well, your sisters are looking for you. But because I had a
Oh
previous
my
encounter,
goodness. Wow.
yeah, I had a previous encounter when I wrote to my family in Poland at 18. It was intercepted by someone pretending to be my family in the village. So I was very leery. So I said, well, if this is my family looking for me, let them write to me in English and I will decide if it's my family. And of course, I receive a letter, which is in my book, 13 Years Lost. Dear Chris, I am your sister Elizabeth. I've been looking for you my whole life. We've
Oh.
gotten you. We love you. We're so happy that we can finally be in touch. And we heard that you want to be in contact with us too. So of course, my whole nightmare, the whole past was just so overwhelming.
Hmm.
But it's still communist Poland, so I had to, I invited my first sister Teresa to come here, and then later I wanted to go to Poland, and I didn't have any documents because when I left these people that day, they wouldn't let me take anything, no photos, no documents. So I had to call all the courthouses, trying to remember when I was adopted, when I was naturalized as an American citizen, putting together my identity. And thank God I was able to get all the information, and I got myself a passport. But I didn't know how to get back to Poland to get a visa into a communist country. And so my sister that was with me, she knew of a General Assembly member that was coming from Warsaw to the UN. And so she contacted him and asked him if I could meet with him to help me get a visa to Poland. So that's how I ended up going to the United Nations to meet with this person. And while there, I just happened to mention this must be an amazing place to work at, because being from another country and another continent, I just was like, oh my God, there's a whole world out there. And so yeah, and he's like, why don't you go apply? And I was like, no, I mean, me? And he's like, why not? Just, I said, well, I didn't go to college. He said, well, apply for like a secretarial post, take the typing, the shorthand, get that. So I did. And I had to go for tests. I had to travel back from Philadelphia to New York. I passed, and I ended up working at the United Nations. In 1979, I started on the International Conference on Women that was held in Copenhagen. And that's how my life started at the UN.
Oh my goodness. What a story, Christine. That was amazing. And you just were awesome the way you presented it. And I felt the emotion of it. That was really appreciate you sharing that part of your life with my audience. Now we're going to take a quick 15-second break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then we're going to talk about your book. So we'll be right back.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another: gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
Well, thank you, Christine, for sharing your story. Again, it was compelling to say the least. And now we're going to the inspirational part and you telling us what got you through. And if someone may be suffering in any area, that you can give them a word of encouragement when they're going through something severe. So what
Of
got you
course.
through?
Well, all of us face difficult times in our lives, and all the things that I've been through, and we understand each other. But I, at one point, just realized I have to let go. I had to let go of the adopted parents, of the anger and all the sadness and the hurt that was inside of me, because I knew that if I carried that with me, my life would be different. It would hold me back. I would have anger. There were so many harmful emotions. And I just felt that I needed to keep going. I mean, I left Poland on a hope and a dream. And so I had to not let go of those dreams. I kept going. I kept believing in myself. And I knew that if I just didn't give up and I kept going and doing my best and trying and choosing to move forward,
Right, exactly.
that what kept me going. It was like every day we all make a choice. We can be,
Mm.
we can fall back, we can give up. I just didn't know how to give up. I gave up once. I knew,
That's right. Mm.
yeah, and I knew that was not that would not solve my problems. So that knowledge kept me moving. I kept, just going forward. If one door is closed, open another door. And even in that feeling, and once you succeed, that first step that you do well, you know that you can take the next step. And each time, each step that I took to find myself, to let go of all the pain, helped me to move forward. And I think all of us, so many things that happen in our lives that are so difficult, that hold us back. If we can just have a moment of kindness towards ourselves and just let those things go. However, close that door, open another, take a deep breath, take a walk. Anything that not to focus on all the negative that happens in your life. And believe me,
Exactly. Yes.
I had nothing but negativity. I was alone. I was abused. I was beaten. I was told horrible names. I was fearful. But in us, there's a strength. And if we can just find it, find that moment of peace, of letting go of all that hate, and quietly, these decisions help us every day to move forward. They give us permission. They release us from the pain. So knowing that you cannot control everything, but you always have a say in what comes next in your life. You can always open that door. You can always try to have a better, look at the light, better, thoughts. Just keep going. Because I know that helped me. This is, I always kept moving. I'm like, and people, weren't you afraid? What am I going to be afraid of? I left Poland at the age of 9.
Good
What's
point.
the worst thing that can happen? So I wasn't afraid to be a single mother. I wasn't afraid to take a job on. I wasn't afraid to move to New York alone, live at the YMCA. I was working for Social Security for 6 years. And I joined the UN on a 3-month contract in New York where I didn't know a soul. I was, I had a daughter, so I had to and I'm like, I can do it, step by step. I took the job. I resigned. My daughter stayed with my friend. I lived at the Y. And you just keep moving one foot in front of the other. You don't look back. You just keep going forward.
Very good. I think, and I agree. Never ever give up hope. Keep looking forward. So how has your story helped others? And maybe share about your book at the same time, 13 Years Lost, and how your book has helped others.
Well, I've had friends that read it, and first, some of them actually thought I was always afraid to make a move. To make a change in my life. And she said, "I read your book," and I'm like, "What am I afraid of?" Some of them moved to another state. I got a text from a friend, a woman that read my book. She moved to Athens, Greece. She said, "Thank you so much for the courage that I've read that you showed me in your book. Now I have the courage to go live in another country. I have the courage to believe in myself." It shows that your book has shown me that never to give up on myself, to just keep going forward, to make changes that I've always wanted to, but I was afraid. I
Mm,
realized there's nothing to be afraid of. If you just, if you want to move forward, you take that next step, and you then can look back at your life and not say, well, I wish I did that. I have no regrets. Of course, I would never want to relive my life.
good point.
you know Never, but I have no regrets. I met a wonderful man, my husband, in Africa. I've been held up at gunpoint in Angola. I've been blessed by the Pope at the United Nations. I've learned how to drive a tank. I've been
Word.
tram in the South.
Oh. So now is your book 13 Years Lost your whole story or tell
Yeah,
us? Okay.
It's the whole story. It's on Amazon, 13 Years Lost. Actually, it has won 4 awards. It has won the Literary Titan Book Award, the gold medal. It has
Oh, awesome.
it received the Independent Book Publishers Award, the American Writing Award, and the Indies Today Award. So it has been, I didn't write it to be recognized or anything, but the publisher had put me in for these different awards. And I'm so pleased it has won in all these, as a memoir. So even that, I am truly honored to have received this recognition. And I have a friend who is working on it to be a movie. She thinks it will be a perfect movie,
Oh, I believe
an
that too.
inspirational
Yes.
movie.
Yes.
And she's like, well, we need to get Angelina Jolie and Tom Cruise.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So actually, and she's coming from France now. So we're sort of, working on a screenplay, and I have a media press kit. And also I have a website, ChristineSadry.com. I'm on Facebook, Christine Sadry, and Instagram. So you can find me and you can hear more, podcasts about my life, my book. And I have 2 Broadway billboards advertising my book. So
oh my goodness. Where is that?
on Broadway,
On Broadway.
on
Oh my
48
word,
Broadway.
Christine. That is amazing. Wow. Well, you are an awesome storyteller, and you just had me, from when time you opened your mouth, I was spellbound listening to your story, and I appreciate it, and I know my audience is as well. And I thank you for your perseverance. That's your under the word perseverance in the dictionary is probably your name, right? You never
Yeah.
gave up and you
Resilience.
just kept
Yeah.
going through.
Yeah.
And I
Never
thank
ever
you.
give up.
That's right. Okay, well, this has been awesome. I appreciate all aspects of your story. Like I said, we were going to share this with the world, and I know that it's going to really help other people. And also, I think bring things into perspective that when you think you're going through something and you hear somebody else's story, you can always find somebody worse off than yourself.
Yeah.
Listen to how they got through, and it gives you encouragement and strength. And I know that that's what your mission is. And I,
Absolutely. Especially for women. Women go through so
yes,
much.
yes, yes,
And they have
exactly.
that strength, that innate strength. And I just hope that after reading my book, they find it in themselves and believe in themselves.
Right. And that's the goal. I appreciate that. Well, thank you again, Christine, for being on Never Ever Give Up Hope. And you definitely, like I said, are the poster girl for that very thing,
Thank you
including the
so much.
perseverance. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Never Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.